In today's video, I'm going to be showing you how to improve your graphics load orders for Skyrim. The information you'll be learning today will give you a deeper understanding of how things work and what you should look out for as you're creating these load orders for yourselves. We're also going to be building a load order in this video. Skyrim's usually a cold place, so why not give it a summer makeover? This video is for Xbox, but you can still use the information universally for just about any game once you understand it. There's a ton of things I'll be going over in this video, so it's important to follow along. The first few sections of this video will show us how to start off on the best foot possible. This will prevent us from having any issues later on in the future. The first thing we're going to learn is how to clean our game files and why it's important, followed by understanding what a foundation is, how to build one, and how to organize a load order. Without further ado, let us begin. For Xbox, when it comes to downloading mods, you can run into tons of issues, so it's best to start off with a clean slate. We'll start out by clearing out our reserved data cache. This is the most important step to take before using a new load order. If you ever modded the game before and deleted all mods through the Creation Club, then you haven't truly cleared the game. Game files are either left over or left modified when you delete them in this way, so it's important that we purge the modded files and use the backup. We just did this when we cleared the reserved data. Now, if you want the best results, hard reset your console after. I believe this is optional since not doing this hasn't affected me before, but to be safe, you can. Now that our Skyrim has been reset and fully cleaned, it's time we started building up our load orders. So first, let's step into the Creation Club and begin. In order to have a better time organizing and downloading mods, we must first understand how a load order should be set up. Searching for mods in the same order as they should be downloaded will save you a tremendous amount of time and headaches. I'm going to be using ChatGPT for this since you can't really rely too much on the many different sources out there organizing it one way or another, all claiming to be right, and yet they're all different at the same exact time. ChatGPT was used to organize my AI load order, which in every case suffered zero performance losses even after conflicting mods. And I'm no expert developer or anything, but it also makes logical sense when you're looking at it. For some bonus preparation, keep in mind that as we're downloading mods, they will not be applied to the game until you back out of the Creation Club. There are times where you won't have a choice since you're likely to freeze nowadays, but the reason this is important is because if you're testing out mods and delete them, they will likely leave a trace and can manipulate what you see. Have you ever broken your load order, recorded it, and re-downloaded it again only to find that it doesn't look the same? This is why, and clearing your reserves fixes the issue. The best thing you can do is record your new load order, clear out the reserves, and re-download everything. Here's how you should be organizing your load orders. You can use the timestamps on the video's timeline to come back and forth to this point when modding. If you're not using the mods in this video, you can still follow along. When it comes to modding, think of it like building a house. You need a stable foundation first before you can build your walls, add your roof, and decorate the house when you know it's not going to fall down on you. So the first set of mods we'll be grabbing is our base fixes and patches. So what does this mean? This means we're going to find mods that directly affect how the core game works. If something changes or fixes the game engine's functionality, then it should be the first on the list. We're all familiar with the unofficial Skyrim Special Edition patch at this point. This is the perfect example of what you should look for. Patch in this case can be looked at as large or dramatic change or fix for the most part. There are other kind of patches, but we'll be getting to those later. Again, these are for the core parts of the game. Think about lights and physics since the game engine can control that. So let's go ahead and download a few of these mods and move on to the next step. The first thing we're going to do is download all of our Creation Club mods. This is required for anything that is labeled AE to work. Now we're going to download the unofficial Skyrim patch. This just fixes a lot of the small things about the game. We're going to download the master file More Dynamic Lighting. This just adds more shadows to add that life to the game. Now we're going to download the Reconciliation series to further patch and fix the game. This can be looked at as another unofficial Skyrim patch. This is one half of our foundation. You can use these mods in every graphical load order if you wish. These mods are so good at what they do, they should become a staple part of your load orders regardless of the style. So to apply all the changes that we made, we're going to back out and go back into the Creation Club. The next set of mods are going to be for performance and optimization. Make sure you find something to boost the performance since mods inevitably degrade the game's performance. Even till this day, the game is riddled with poor optimization. One important mod that you should download is EFPS. EFPS is a mod that'll save you tons of FPS. This is a mod you should use no matter what load order you have due to its functionality. What EFPS does is make better use of the occlusion culling feature in the engine. What is occlusion culling? Occlusion culling is when an engine removes objects like houses, trees, lights, shadows, and other assets and modules from being rendered out of camera view. If you're unfamiliar with what rendering is, it's basically loading, in other words. Next we'll be adding uncapped FPS. If you're on the older generation of Xbox, this lets you achieve 60 FPS whenever it reaches it. This feature is already enabled on Xbox Series S and up, so why download it? We're downloading this mod simply to disable the VSync. VSync, aka vertical synchronization, is used to help with visual and performance smoothness by reducing screen tearing and improving input lag. However, VSync isn't done properly in this game. It's like it's doing the opposite, which causes major stuttering in low FPS instances. That's why 30 FPS looks and feels super choppy more than any other game at 30 FPS. This is the best we can do on Xbox. So with our base fixes and performance mods added, our foundation is completed for now, and it's time we move on to the next part. If you're following along, your foundation should look something like this. Now that the foundation is built, we're going to move on to the most interesting parts of building up graphics. We'll be moving on to textures and meshes. But first, let's get your brain juices flowing. I'm going to try to broaden out your ideas first so we can have a track to follow along. After that, I'll explain the world around textures and meshes so that you can understand what, why, and how it's being put together. Knowing this info will help you understand the mods you're downloading, especially while reading mod descriptions. Now when it comes to building a graphics load order, it's important that you have an idea of what you want. Are you going for that fantasy look, a rustic look, bleak look? Perhaps you want to go for a realistic look. Maybe you want to remaster the look, or simply fix the vanilla look. There's a plethora of mods out there, and it can be a bit of a challenge at times choosing what you want blindly. So to avoid having a crazy looking game or spend countless hours trying out mods, having an idea of what you want to build first is key. Do not be afraid to do some research. If you want to go for a Viking theme, then look up some pictures of the land, the trees, weapons, armors, homes, the grass. Look up the culture. Don't forget you can mod your audio as well. You can find Viking music to really immerse yourself in the game and other sound effects to further the immersion. So try to think as deeply as you can. Alright, so you have your idea. You're ready to search for the mods you want. Excellent. Now let's break down and understand a few things about textures and meshes. Again, this is to support your search by learning how these work. We'll start by going over meshes. This is a mesh. A mesh is the geometry of how something is made. In simpler terms, it's the shape and silhouette of any person, place, or thing. These are literally everywhere, even the ground itself. Let's download some mesh mods. What you want to do first is find mods to fix anything wrong with the meshes. My favorite fixes are as follow. Savior of Skyrim's quest and gameplay improvements to fix a few more issues with quest and scripts. Can't go wrong with a few more fixes. The next will be Savior of Skyrim graphical fixes and improvements to further fix issues with the current meshes. If you look at these photos, you can compare each of these to see what's being fixed. All changes made here gives your game more fidelity, improving the game's graphical realism. You can check the description for more details on the fixes. Our next mod is Flowers and Plants Mesh Fix. We're downloading this so that plant meshes will react better to light and shadows. As you can see in the comparisons, the plants in the before side are brighter and non-reactive in the sunlight. Meanwhile, on the after side, they react to being in the shadows. Next is Fix All-in-One Mesh Improvements. We'll be downloading this to fix other meshes in the game. You can see what's being fixed here in the description as well. Our last mesh fix will be Better Windhelm Ground Meshes. You can see the difference here on the screen. Not much is needed to be said about this fix. Now that our fixes have been downloaded, let's make sure they're in the right spot. Since these are fixes that make major changes to the environment around us, they should be placed in our foundational section under Uncapped FPS. Now, I'll be adding other meshes that'll bring out the quality some more, starting with our Static Mesh Improvement mod. We'll be using Super SMIM, since 1 is my favorite mod, and 2 it offers quality meshes like turning a flat 2D chain into a 3D chain, same with ropes and many other objects, all with its own high quality textures. This needs to be downloaded before any other texture mod since it further edits meshes. You don't want to have this after your textures because those textures will still be mapped to the older meshes and will be incorrectly mapped on the new Static Mesh Improvement, so always load it first. Next, we'll be complementing the SMIM mod by adding Lucidap's High Poly project. Why? What does this do? There's a key term in the title, High Poly. High Poly in other words means it's high in polygons. To understand what this means, we'll need to know what a polygon is, and why it's an important thing to look out for when downloading graphical mods. I've actually already covered this topic before in my How to Make a More Attractive Character video, so here's the clip of the explanation from that video. What's a polygon, you may ask? In geometry, a polygon is a plane figure made up of line segments connected to form a closed polygonal chain.
Just about everything you see in a game is a mesh with a texture painted over it. Now, the shapes that are used in the mesh have line segments. Since Skyrim is as old as time now, and every mesh appears to be blocky or jaggy, these meshes are known as low poly meshes. So we're going to fix that by adding mods that add more line segments to the polygonal chain. The more line segments, the smoother the shape. Smooth shapes are known as high poly. We're going to start with finding a high poly body/skeleton. This is the first step. Now that you understand the importance of higher polygons, you should always be on the lookout for any improvements regarding them. Now, I'll skip ahead and download the other meshes since now we don't really need to explain them. After that, I'm just going to show you how they're going to be organized. So with these new mods, these mods should be placed directly under your mesh fixes, right below Better Windhelm ground meshes. So, for now we've completed the mesh section. We may or may not add more to this section later on. Now we'll be moving on to the next section. Meshes require identity. In this case, the identity is what's known as a texture. A texture in the graphics design field gives an item the quality of a surface. But before we get into selecting our textures, we need a good foundation for them to work off of. You will occasionally come across a mod that says it's modified the UV maps in some way. Now, what is a UV map? It's the process of taking the textures of a 3D model and projecting it back onto a 2D plane. This plane is used to move the coordinates of a mesh's texture around the mesh itself. UV doesn't stand for anything special, it simply replaces the names of X, Y, and Z on a 3D graph since they're already in use. What does all this mean? I'll give you an example. Take a look at this picture. The rock and grass do not appear to be different objects. It's as if the grass was painted like a rock. In this case, this looks like a single ground mesh, and the texture is the rock and grass we see. This is what a correctly mapped texture looks like. A bad UV map would have the rock being somewhat painted on the ground or stretched out to the point that it doesn't look like a rock. There's plenty of things like this in Skyrim, so always look out for a UV mapping tweak. I explained all of this because our first mod will actually be a UV map tweak. We'll be using it as a foundation, and this will tell our other textures how to react to the changes. Let's download Enhance UV Textures. Now that our mapping for the textures were edited, we can proceed to add our textures. Like I said earlier, we're building a summertime mod list here. When you think of summer, you're reminded of how lively the world can be. Since life flourishes the most during the summer, we can see all sorts of different colors during this time. Winter is the complete opposite. It's cold and it's dead. With plant life being mostly dead, so go the rich varieties of color. Dead things like grass and trees fill the world with the same few born colors of death, such as tan and brown. When it snows, it only makes things worse, covering those colors in all white. With summer having all these colors, I'm going to search for textures that represent the richness of it. To make sure we cover all structures, you can look at the description of the Skyrim All-in-One mod and see what it covers. Use that as a reference to make sure you're covering all your structures. I won't be using Skyrim All-in-One, but I will be using parts of it. It's important that when you're choosing your textures, you make sure that they match a specific color scheme. Since we're going for rich and dark, we need to download other textures that support our idea. It's much easier to do this by downloading all-in-one textures like Noble Skyrim and Skyrim All-in-One. On the other hand, you can download each element of the all-in-one separately. It's harder to do, but even so, this will give you the most control over what's being added to where. I'm going to download the rest of the textures now and get back to you. Here's the combination of textures I thought would best fit the summer vibe. According to ChatGPT, the next thing we'll need to download is our water mods, followed by weather mods. In my last video, the water the AI chose was really bright and vibrant, and it reminded me of being on a tropical island, so we'll most certainly pick that mod up. Moving on to weather mods. Aside from changing how the particles look whenever it precipitates, weather mods play a key role in setting the overall tone of the world we inhabit. It changes tons of things like adding new sounds to the wild and goes as far as coloring the lights and effects around us to help feel those changes. You can also look at a weather mod as a sort of exterior lighting mod, but that's not just it. Some weather mods go as far as adding shooting stars, water droplets hitting the ground during the rain, and even rainbows. A very important note. Using multiple weather mods will cause many conflicts, and these conflicts can result in weather either being too overbearing, replacing itself with the new mod, or big drops in performance, or is downright broken. Make sure that you're choosing weather mods that don't do the same thing to avoid this issue. You must read the descriptions. Can you stack up weather mods?
Yes, it is possible to use multiple weather mods, and you might even find a beautiful combination from doing so, but you do risk everything I stated earlier. Try it out for yourself, it's not gonna hurt you. I'll start by adding the main weather mod I want to use as a foundation. Now we're going to follow that up with a complementary mod, Wonders of Weather. This mod adds a lot of raindrop splashes on the ground, rainbows, shooting stars, meteor showers, all sorts of things. But for now, this should be all we need for our weather mods. So I'll be moving on to the next category, lighting. Lighting is one of the most important parts of making a video game. It's up there with textures and performance. With Skyrim being so old, the lighting looks really outdated and stale. Let's spice it up by adding in some lighting mods. First, we're going to start with the simple lighting workaround to negate light flickering. We'll be downloading Paraphernalia Anti-Flicker to assist with this change. This will act as a foundation which turns off all vanilla lights so that your current lighting mods won't have to fight against other sources. This mod should go above USSEP, meaning it's the first on the list. We're still building up a foundation here, so next we'll be downloading a standard lighting template. This makes it so that lights react seamlessly during transitions. It removes ambient fog so lights aren't hit with the fog, and it also darkens the ambient lighting a bit so things don't appear washed out and ashy. This will likely darken up your interiors, but not too much. All other lighting mods downloaded after these should be loaded below the standard lighting template so that they can be affected by the changes. This finishes our foundation for now, and we'll be moving on to the next little bit that'll further improve our lighting graphics. On this part, we'll be using Lux Orbis for exterior lighting, and after, we'll be downloading Lux for interior lighting. But before we can use those, we need to download their master files as well as the resources. These will automatically be placed at the top and should be organized to come right after EFPS, like this. Now that we downloaded our master files and placed them where they needed to be, let's download the actual Lux plugins. These plugins come right after your last weather mod, so we'll be placing it like so. We're closing in on the last set of major graphical changes, Flora Overhauls and NPC Overhauls. Any mod after these two will be looked at as a minor change. Minor changes should go near the end since they're smaller, less intrusive, and don't require much to be loaded since they don't make large changes to the world. You can use everything you learn in this video and apply them to the last few sections of the list, if it's necessary. So all I'm going to do now is follow the rest of the load order and get the mods downloaded. Let's move on to the Flora Overhaul section and follow that up with NPC changes. Now, when it comes to your Flora mods, the key to wrapping all of this up is to choose the right set of Flora mods to fit the vibe you're looking for. If you're looking to make a cold and harsh Skyrim, then consider finding a dead tree mod or a dead grass mod. In this case, summer is our theme, so we need to find ourselves some really colorful Flora mods. Here are all the mods I chose to add to this section. Finally, for our major changes, we'll be touching up our NPCs. When it comes to setting up NPCs and beautification, you want to set those up similarly to the way we've been setting up this entire load order. For humanoid NPCs, we'll start with the mesh change. No more blocky faces is an example of a mesh change. Think of it as adding more polygons to the head mesh. Next, we'll be using Pandorable NPCs to cover basic NPCs, and after that, we'll be using bitchin' wives to cover all of the wives. I'm not going to do too much on this section besides covering the NPCs, so I'll move on to the next part of the NPC coverage, and that's animal NPCs. Fluffworks is by far the best animal retexturing mod I've ever seen and used on Xbox, so I'll definitely be adding that to the list. That will always be added to my list. Lastly, to retexture beasts and monsters, we'll be using Divergent's Compendium of Beasts. I'm going to go ahead and download the rest of the sections and show you the final list, but before we go there, I'll summarize the last three sections. Those sections are as follow: Clutter and Object Textures, Dynamic Overhauls, and Patches. The first section that comes after NPC Overhauls is Clutter and Object Textures. This section is for effects like fire and ice, and other small objects considered to be clutter. Things like plates, buckets, and food. Next up is Dynamic Overhauls, which will consist of LOD mods and miscellaneous mods like Skyrim LOD and Alternate Start. And finally, the very last section, Patches. Patches in this section are mostly used to make other mods work together in consistency. You will also find patches that'll fix, change, or add elements of the mod that is needed. To get the most consistency out of your list, the best thing you can do is search up the mods you've already downloaded and type patch after the name to see if they're available. After that, scroll down the list and see if there's a patch for any mod you have. For example, if we downloaded Northern Roads and Landscape Fixes for grass mods, because they both edit ground levels, you will see many ditches and holes that you can fall through.
So what we do is search Northern Roads patch and scroll down until we can see landscape fixes for grass mods. Download that and put that in the patch section to make these two work together. After tons of tweaking, searching, and testing, my summer list is finally completed. Here's the final results.